It's 2 minutes to 8 there now. So just before we kick things off, Micheál, how is the country looking down your side? You're over in West Cork there. You got a lot of rain lately.
Yeah, so I suppose it has been challenging, John. I suppose over the last night we got a lot of rain, probably in around 25, 30 mil in total. But over the last month or so, we have seemed to be getting days with a lot of rain. It seems to be coming in buckets rather than showers around here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
grazing is becoming tricky on some farms.
Yeah, along the western seaboard, I suppose, maybe the northwest as well. They've experienced a lot of rain there. I know one farmer there in Monaghan there, he had about 10 inches of rain sort of in the later half of June, July, and I suppose this week as well. So, a lot of rain in a short period of time. And on some heavier soils, I suppose things are getting tricky now. So, even maybe some fellas moving, towards grazing lighter covers and going back to 12-hour strips and things like that to try and get grass grazed. So, that's the way we are. And I suppose just looking ahead for the week, things are looking like they're going to pick up with LD's predicted grass growth for the next week. So in the eastern half of the country anyway, expecting high growth with good temperatures over the next few days. So I mean, Micheál, it's just 8 o'clock here now, so I think we'll kick off. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to the Teagasc Autumn Grazing event. So my name is John Douglas, for any of you that don't know me, and I'm joined with Micheál O'Leary from Pasture Base Ireland. So thanks for taking the time to tune in, and we're looking forward to any questions that you have. So in relation to autumn grazing management, so you can start getting them on, writing them up and send them into us there whenever you get a chance. So over the next half an hour or 40 minutes, we'll answer all your questions. So first, I'd like to thank the sponsors of Grass 10. So we have Grassland Agro, AIB, FBD, the Department of Agriculture, and the Irish Farmers Journal. And I suppose without them, we wouldn't be able to run events like this. So it's great to get their support. Just on the Grass 10 side of things, Grass 10 program, it's been running now it's in its fourth year. And the objective of Grass 10 is to utilize 10 tons of grass and achieve 10 grazings per paddock. So that's, it's growing a lot of grass and utilizing as much of it as we can and getting as many grazings in a year. So, where autumn grazing management fits into that, I suppose, is, we still have a lot of grass to grow this year. 30% of the annual tonnage will come in the next 3 or 4 months. And we're still trying to get 3 grazings in. We're coming to the end of the summer period. So the more days we get of grass, the more, the higher the profit on the farm, basically. So autumn grazing management has a big influence on, this time of year and into the springtime as well. So Micheál, just over to yourself there. Just explain quickly about Grass 10 and growing grass and utilizing grass. So where are we at, I suppose, around the country with Pasture Base? From the farmers that are measuring weekly, how much grass has been grown?
Yeah, no problem, John. So I suppose just for anyone that has joined over the last few minutes, that if you have any questions as regards autumn grazing management, that if you just post a question there, and either myself or John will try to answer it. And I suppose, John, to come back to your question in relation to Pasture Base Ireland, there's roughly about 1,900 covers coming into Pasture Base each week across dairy, beef and sheep farms. And I suppose, looking at the figures yesterday, there is a lot of grass on farms at the moment. So the average farm cover roughly of 740, cover per livestock unit of 222, and a growth rate there of 67. So I suppose growth is quite good at the moment. Despite all the rain, I suppose, in the west and southwest, I suppose temperatures are warm. So I suppose it is, I suppose, encouraging growth. As regards growth year to date, I suppose up to last week, farms had grown on average about 7.8 tons. Compare that with 2019, with 8 tons grown, and then if we look back at 2018, we were in the midst of the drought at this stage back in 2018, and we would have grown 6.4 ton. So I suppose we are nearly on par 2019.
Okay, very good. And so how many people are using Pasture Base weekly? How many covers are you getting, Micheál?
So number of covers roughly about 1,800, 1,900. But about half of them are coming from our offline app, PBI Grass, and I suppose over the years, the number of farmers using pasture-based has increased, but also farmers are using it more. So there's more covers being recorded by each farmer. So I suppose it's great to see that the application is being used, I suppose, when so much is being invested by Teagasc.
Yeah, great stuff. And so, how many measures should a farmer have done this year to date? So,
So,
in order to record that, say, 8 ton grown so far this year, how many walks would I want to done to have recorded that as well?
yeah, so those farmers that have grown 7.8 tons, they would have measured 15 times plus. So you would really have to, at this stage, you would have to have 15 plus in order to get an accurate dry matter production for 2020. So if you do one weekly from now on, closing, you're going to roughly end up somewhere around 25, 27 covers. So it'll give you a good accurate tonnage for your farm.
So over the next I suppose August time, maybe people are starting to think that grass is starting to slow down. Like, should we stop measuring grass, Micheál? What should we keep going?
No, it's probably a critical time. I think the autumn. If we look back to 2018, we had a great autumn. Soil temperatures were great. Conditions were absolutely perfect because we were after coming out of the drought. But in 2019, completely different. The autumn seems to come in very quickly, and grass just seems to disappear. Whether we didn't build up enough, and we can go through those figures later. But it definitely, housing in 2019 was an early autumn. And I suppose 2020, I suppose we're here tonight, so I suppose maximise the amount of grass on the farm or in the autumn time, and try to keep stock out as long as we can.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So just for anyone that's joined there lately, we are taking questions there. So there's I don't know if there's any come through just yet there, but if you have any questions to do with autumn grazing there, please send them in. And whether you're a dairy, beef, or sheep farmer, and you're wondering, how you can get more days at grass, or how do you set yourself up for the spring better, send your questions our way. So, Micheál, just see, can I share a picture here from my screen? You can probably see that there now. Maybe it's slightly blurry. I'm not sure. Can you see that okay, Micheál?
Yeah, see that there. Yeah, so that's the roadmap to grow 12 or 14.
That's our Grass 10 roadmap, I suppose, to grow in your 14 tons. So, when I talk about utilising 10 tons, we need to grow 13 or 14 ton to actually utilise the 10 tons. So that's just a roadmap there. So you can see to date there, the first rotation is up until sort of early April, and then from early April then to August, you're looking at your summer, and you're trying to achieve 6 grazings within that. So, at 20 days, that's 120 days, a 20-day rotation. So there's six grazing rotations. Now, I suppose that leads you 70% of the grass grown to date this year, with another 30% to grow for the rest of the year, really. So, there's still a lot to play for there, Micheál. And every ton of grass utilised on dairy farms is worth €173 per hectare, and every ton of grass utilised on dry stock farms is €105. So, if we're losing out a ton, we are losing out on profitability. So looking ahead then, Micheál, we're sort of finishing up on summer grades, and we're sort of in a transition period to August and grazing. What's the sort of first half of the autumn grazing management? What should we focus on?
Yeah, I suppose August is an important month, as you said, John. I suppose we're changing from, we'd say, growth versus demand and cover per livestock unit, and I suppose we're changing then into, I suppose, average farm cover, and I suppose autumn grazing is probably broken down into two main parts. The first part is probably from mid August up to, I suppose, mid September. We have about a month there in order to build up grass. So that's the first part of autumn grazing is to build up cover. And I suppose the second part of the autumn grazing then is your last rotation. So I suppose it's using that grass on your farm as best you can, and to graze it out, I suppose, and to set your farm ultimately up for the springtime. So I suppose what we do, we'll say in the next month, that will dictate our last rotation, and what we do in the last rotation, that will dictate how we'll I suppose what cover we'll open in the springtime. So I suppose it all kind of fits in, and I suppose every farm kind of needs a plan in order, I suppose, to maximize the grass growing on the farm.
And I suppose the more we're measuring our growth rates on the farm and looking at it and seeing how we're managing, the more we do of that, the better we're able to, I suppose, suit our plan for our farm, rather than maybe just going by general guidelines that, might be okay for some farms, maybe not for others. Which probably leads in maybe to some of the first questions here. And the first one there is from Paddy O'Brien. So Paddy has said there, hi John and Micheál, when should you start building grass on a wet farm, and how high a cover should we aim for? So I suppose there on that scenario, the targets, we might actually just throw up the targets there. I think I have them here.
Yeah, so we can see them there, John, for the different stocking rates.
See them there. So that's, I suppose, what Paddy was talking about when we start building grass. How high a cover should we aim for? We're probably talking about average farm cover. So we're switching from looking at pre-grazing yield and grazing covers of 1400 now to looking at building up grass. So we're moving from looking at your pre-grazing yield now to looking at average farm cover and building it up. And I suppose for a dry farm, you're probably looking at stock or building your farm cover up to sort of 11 to 1200, somewhere in that region for a dry farm. But if we do that on a heavy farm, and that's where Paddy is getting at, for a wet farm, heavy land, where should we go to? And I suppose the answer probably to that would be somewhere between 900 and 1000.
Yeah, so that plenty, yeah.
Sorry, Micheál, yeah.
That farm cover would be plenty for on a farm, somewhere around, we'd say 950 for argument's sake.
Yeah, so that might mean, it might be 10 days less grazing, during November time or something. But usually on the heavier wet farms, they can't get grazing into November anyway. They can in certain instances where grazing infrastructure, and I know Paddy there asked the question, he's a great video on the spur roadway. So Paddy's making the most of his grazing and on-off grazing in the shoulder. So 900 to 1000 is plenty for a heavy farm to get through. You don't want to be grazing big heavy covers, when the ground conditions aren't great on heavy land. So.
And I suppose just to come back to Paddy's question there as well, he will probably be starting last rotation probably in the end of September, probably the 25th of September. Yeah. So I suppose, if he is carrying too much grass, he won't be able to graze it, or he won't be able to utilize it either. So I suppose that is a very good, I suppose, first question to start with is that the targets that are shown on the screen, they are a blueprint, but they don't fit every farm exactly. So I suppose it is very farm specific. And
I suppose the thing about those targets, I suppose, is the lighter stocked you can leave it a little bit longer. So I'd be saying any farm stock at 3.5 on sort of mid and enough ground, I suppose, should be starting to build this week. After the weekend, if you're starting maybe towards the next weekend, and you're stock 2.5, into the following week, into mid to the third week of August, I suppose. So yeah, we move on to the next question there. So the question is from Drummond Farm: how much N should we be spreading in August? So look, grass growth rates in August are similar enough to the previous months, especially when you're building cover, you tend to hold your growth rates up. So we are still growing a good level of grass, and generally we've been going 1 unit a day over the summertime, and I'd probably continue with that for now. So probably going with another 20 units. You might extend the rotation a little bit, but generally you're not growing much more grass. So it's all you're putting on the end to grow the grass. So if it's similar amount of grass growing, well then you're rain. So
yeah, and I suppose you get a better response in August compared to September. And I suppose if you are heavily stocked, you need to grow extra grass, or you need feed somewhere so it's either spreading fertilizer or so I suppose you need to go with one or the other.
Yeah. I suppose we'd be a lot of the grass 10 groups that we have around the country, we'd be promoting the use of protected urea, and a lot of the farmers this year who maybe couldn't get their hands on it last year with issues with availability, they've been using it this year now, and they've seen no difference. It's growing plenty of grass, and as you say, Micheál, you're getting nearly 1.5 times response to putting it out today versus in a month's time. So we'll actually grow more grass if we get it out a bit earlier. We're getting a better response. So yeah.
And just the next question there from Edward Trainer. when building covers in the autumn, you will end up with grazing paddocks with 1600 plus. What about paddocks with clover in them? Still graze them at 1300. Coming back that question, Edward, you should have no problem grazing covers in around 2000 with clover in them. You will be, heading to the end of the first rotation. You'll be grazing high covers, and if we are going to reach, we'll say the target cover, target average farm cover of 100. We're going to be grazing covers of 2000, 2500, somewhere in between that. So there is no issues with clover with those high covers. The issue is will be ground conditions, trying to graze them when conditions do allow, and trying to graze them out as tightly as possible. So with clover, you should have no problems with high covers. And then just maybe touching on the closing off strategy for paddocks with a lot of clover in them. It is better that you graze them off towards the end of the last rotation, so that they won't lose cover in the winter time. So those paddocks are combined with a short cover, small cover.
Down to the base as well, because the clover sort of snakes along the ground. So if we can let light down to the stolon, it has better chance of surviving over winter time, I suppose, as well. And clover has issues with persistency, so if we can do that, we should clover on better for the next year. Yeah, good point, Micheál. Yeah. So looking at the next question then from Thomas Gleeson there. Hi John, Micheál. For somebody going with one more fertilizer application, should they go now or next month? So again, that might tie back to what we said about our response to fertilizer. So Thomas, if we're trying to grow as much grass, I suppose, as we can, I'd be going now, because we'll grow more, and grass grows grass. So if we grow more earlier, we'll grow more later. At the same time, if I'm very lowly stocked, if you build too much grass now, that's also a bad thing. So we can have too much of a good thing at times. So grass is no different. So too many heavy covers are issues with grazing them out, and issues with the regrowths on them. So it depends. If you're higher stocked, I'd be going now, and if you were probably lower stocked, maybe a little bit later in the month, just to balance the response versus being able to actually graze that grass then later on.
A question in from Andrew Deneen. What is your thinking of clover and heavy land? I suppose one thing is that clover does have to be minded that bit more on heavy land, but I suppose work from Solid Farm would show that it works good. They're have a heavy soil there, but again, it just takes that bit of minding. And I suppose with the irrigation changes, I suppose clover is going into most grass mix now. So it is a kind of a plant that we kind of have to get more familiar with. And I suppose if we can get even half the benefits that they're seeing in Clonakilty and Moore Park and Salahead, it will be definitely worth that extra, I suppose, work in order to protect it and to get the most from it.
Yeah. I think John Marr, the head of the Grass 10 program, would say maybe clover and heavy ground, maybe some of the smaller varieties that they might be more persistent. And whilst you mightn't get the full grazing of that clover all the time because it's a smaller leaf and it grows lower, and maybe sometimes the grass could overshadow it, it will provide benefits in fixing. So you mightn't get the benefits from the full benefit from extra milk production, but you will get them from maybe fixing nitrogen. So look, there's a bit more work to be done on that. I suppose Micheál and Ballyhaise are putting in clover now as well. So
they're putting on commercial farms as well around the country on all soil types. So I suppose you can watch this space further, I suppose. Yeah.
So next question there, so from Percy Mills there. So have a cover per cow of 237, and 2 weeks ago was 160. So it's after growth 75 this week. So a lot of grass has grown. We'll have to take out more bales. So I suppose if we go back to maybe just looking at the targets there, because these are a very useful table there for anyone. So it's no harm to have it there. So look, I suppose 237, and you're in the very early August. There's got to be probably a couple of answers to this one, Percy, and it'll depend on your stocking rate. So if you have a stocking rate of 2.5 at this stage, if you have a cover per cow, still have 180, you're doing grand. If you're looking at stocking rate of 3, at the moment, probably 200 would be enough. And if you're looking at, stocking rate 3.5, maybe a bit over 200 at this moment in time. So you still probably have too much grass, and with high growth predicted over the next week, I'd be looking at taking one or two paddocks out now, especially for the higher stock farms. We're getting 4 or 5 days without rain as it looks in the forecast, so I'd be using that opportunity to whip them out. And it's been a bit clever with them too. Like, which ones are you going to whip out? You might have a couple of ones that are slightly heavier, but maybe they're good quality. Maybe there's very few dung pads in them. Maybe they've been baled at some stage or whatever. So it might be looking at some of the lighter covers that maybe just have more dung pads and are poorer quality, and we can get them cleaned out. We're coming into the autumn time and building grass on nice clean swards that are going to be easier to eat out than eating out, around heavy swards around big heavy dung pads. So if they're higher stock farm, I'd be taking them out, this week, as soon as possible, the next few days, and then I wouldn't be cutting any more after that. But if I'm lower stocked, I'll probably keep taking them for another 10 days. So
yes, I suppose if we'll say, for example, that if he does cut them, we'll say straight away, and we'll say the first week in August, you're going to be back grazing them probably in the first week of September again, and you're probably going to be grazing them, probably the 1st of October in your last rotation. So if you wait maybe for 2 weeks time to cut them, they're going to give you very little. You'll probably only get one grazing off. So I suppose, as John says, act now, I suppose, and like that, pick the paddocks. Next question's in there from Rob. Why build cover to 1,200? Pre-grazing covers reach 2,000 plus, which are very hard to graze. Poor quality grass holding. Lower average farm cover, better grass graze.
Yeah.
Very good point, I suppose, and I suppose we come across this question a good bit. But I suppose what really would just be maybe a quick calculation or a quick way of looking of how much grass you will need is to do a grass budget for the autumn. And if you are going to graze, keep your average farm cover low, there will have to be a lot of supplement coming in order, I suppose, to maintain your lower farm cover compared to building it up relatively high to 1,100 and then eating into that farm cover. So the supplement or the feed will have to come from somewhere. You're either going to build it up on your farm, or else you're going to feed it inside. I don't know, John, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, you are going to have longer days of grass. The more days of grass is worth 180 cow in the autumn time. So if you have 100 cows out for a day in November because I built my cover up, it's worth €180 to me. So that would offset a lot of other costs you might have. The other thing that this might come back to, and maybe some farmers don't like grazing heavy covers. And we say heavy covers, we're talking about covers probably of between 2,000 and 2,500. We don't want to be grazing them for a prolonged period. You might graze some covers over 2,000 for 3 or 4 or 5 days. That might be it, and so so the thing about it is that you come back a bit to farmer mindset, and grazing infrastructure on the farm. Like, it's all well and good us using the targets there on the screen, but if we don't have a grazing infrastructure that we can get out to graze during November time, and what we mean by that, I suppose, is having a good paddock system. We sort of assume that everyone has good paddocks, and maybe they could be, better arranged or better set up. Lots of different access points into those paddocks. Lots of access directly from roadways into those paddocks. They're going to give us the best chance to graze during later into the year when ground conditions can be trickier. So
and coming back to grass quality, John, maybe I suppose that the quality of your autumn grass is going to be better than surplus bales. Autumn grass, you're in the vegetative state compared to, we'd say, during the last few weeks, it's in the reproductive state. So you're still talking about a UFL value of 0.85.
Yeah.
So it is, there is a lot of energy in it. I agree with you, though, they can be difficult to graze. But I suppose it comes back to John's point about the techniques, grazing techniques.
Yeah, and sure, look, Micheál, over the last couple of weeks I've been out on farms, and there's farmers going into grazing covers of over 2,000 as it is at the moment, and they have a lot of stem in them. compared to what they will be in September time. There'll be a lot of leaf, even though they could be heavy covers. There'll be a lot of leaf there. So having good grazing infrastructure, being set up to actually go out and graze those paddocks, and having the mindset that I am going to maybe have to do 12-hour strip wires, and I'm going to have to do maybe a little bit of on-off grazing if I have to, or something like that. That's what you're getting paid for, to have those cows out for the extra day or whatever it is. So you have to weigh it up. Maybe it's not for you, but the targets are there and they can be achieved, and there's many farms achieving them. So yeah. So the next question then, Micheál, will be.
Yeah, so another question in from Andrew. What's your single grass variety? I suppose from the on-farm trial, Andrew, that we're running in Moorpark, and we're sowing single variety grass varieties. Farmers are happy with them, and I suppose they do work. They're growing a lot of grass. I suppose the advantage of your mix is, I suppose, you're getting the traits of two varieties and trying to, I suppose, get two that complement each other. And I suppose trying to get the best grass in by using the mix. But definitely there are some good single varieties out there. But it's like breeding or anything. You pick a bull to match the cow, so they're complementing each other. And it's the same with picking two grass varieties, and I suppose the clover variety as well, to go in and to make sure that they are doing what you need. So if you are looking, say, for a grass variety or grass varieties, which maybe you're taking a cut of silage and grazing, that you do look at the silage index as well as the quality index and the overall tonnage. So I suppose just delve a bit deeper into the pasture profit index, and they're published every February with the most up-to-date varieties on.
And I suppose the thing about that is, Micheál, for anyone, like, we get an awful, a lot of questions there at different groups and stuff, like, should I be using a monoculture, like, because they see other fellas having good success with them. But lads are having good success with them on farms that have been, they have a long history of grass measuring. They know how, quickly grass can take off, and reseeded paddocks and things like that. So they're on top of things. And like some of these single, monocultures like Abergain, if you're not maybe back in there every 14, 15 days during periods of the summer, it's just going to go out of control on you. So, it can be easier managed sometimes to manage a sward that has 3 or 4 different varieties in it from that regard as well.
Sure, yeah.
So partially just, this is a comment there from partially clover is great, but docks are an issue. Yeah, that's I suppose they are. Like, it's hard to kill off the docks without killing off the clover. So, if you're reseeding, it's very important to try and, get rid of docks at the time of reseeding, or getting rid of them before you're putting in the clover. So maybe it's a case of spraying off for docks if there's a bad paddock, and then oversown clover the following year or something like that. That might be a good option. Or at least if you're going to start putting in clover, put it into the ones that are the cleaner swards that generally aren't as weedy as some of the other swards. So
I suppose just keeping in the same theme of reseeding, and what are your views on reseeding autumn, if ground conditions allow? So Thomas, if you are, we'll say today, we'll say the 5th of August, if you go and spray a paddock tomorrow, you have to leave that roughly a week. We're in at 12th of August, everything going fine. You're able to cultivate it, sow it, roll it, put fertilizer, lime, and etc. So that's, we'll say, the middle of August, and you probably won't be able to graze that middle of September, middle of October. So you'll have to wait until the middle of October by the time you can graze it. And it'll probably be with lighter stock, more than likely with calves, because I suppose if you do plough it, it's going to be softer, do a lot of cultivation, but you need the lighter stock on it. So I think, all in all, if it was me, I think I would wait until the spring, and to go at it in April, where I suppose you have plenty time in order to spray it off, get a good kill in it, do a lot of cultivating. I suppose you're able to sow it, and then you're able to go in with your post-emergent spray. You're able to graze it at the correct cover, graze it well, get it tillering, and set it up for the coming year. So I suppose if you don't have the field already burnt off, hold off of it.
Yeah. Yeah, as well as that, Micheál, like if you're going to spray off a field there now, and you say you might get a grazing off it this time, you won't get a grazing off it next time round. You'd be looking to get a grazing off it at all, really, for the rest of the year. You'd be, it could be
Yeah,
50 and maybe even a bit more 60-40, against you. But if you lose, say, a week's worth of grazing and that in the autumn time, again, if you come back to the sort of financials of it, it's 180 a cow per day out at grass. If 100 cows lose, say, a week, just a week's worth of grazing from missing 2 grazings off that paddock, that is a cost to the system then as well. So maybe if I think you're going into autumn reseeding, I think it nearly wants to be in on the 1st of August. An extra week in the start of August can make a huge difference between getting the grades or not. Like waiting until the middle of August is really, you're going into no man's land there. You don't know what you get, and if you carry over some heavy covers on reseeds, then your ground is soft in the springtime. If you get a wet spring, you're running into problems. When am I going to get to graze it? When am I going to get to spray it for weeds and those sorts of things as well? So I really want to be weighed up, and as you say, I think Micheál might be holding off till next spring or even till next sort of towards the end of next July. Even if you don't like doing it in the springtime, might be an option.
yeah. So the next question then, what is your opinion on grazing herbage grass swards? Is it possible to do silage out of it?
Uh,
So I
just
suppose,
before you
yeah,
answer that, just to say that like we're still going to be answering questions there for probably another 10 minutes or so. So if you have any questions there, get them in there before we sign off there in about 10 minutes. So if you have any questions there, get them in. So sorry, Micheál. So I presume this question is maybe it's the herbal lays. Is that what this question is getting at?
yeah, yeah. So I suppose it'll be multi-species, plantain, chicory, red and white clover, perennial ryegrass. That sort of a mix, I would think.
Yeah.
And we might take it as being that. And I suppose it is becoming, topical at the moment. And I suppose Teagasc have, suppose they're conducting research at the moment in Johnstown, in Wexford, and they are raising these multi-species, and I suppose they are in the first. They have 1 year, I suppose, completed on them as we speak, and they are going well at the moment as regards dry matter production. And there is a new experiment which will be starting in next year on the Curtains farm um, in Fermoy, where they're going looking at different multi-species versus perennial ryegrass and clover. And I suppose very early days yet. Persistency, I suppose, the biggest issue with these mixed species swards, and will they survive intensive grazing systems, and the likes of cutting and producing silage as well. So I suppose at the moment we don't have any, I suppose, definite answers to that question.
Yeah.
But I know that silage can be produced from it. They just need to be wilted for a day or two, if at all possible, in order to try to increase the dry matter, because the dry matter of these plants are quite low, in around 10 or 11%. But I suppose it just comes back to whether they're persistent enough or whether they'll stay within the system, because the actual cost of the seed is going to be the same as conventional receiving with perennial ryegrass and clover. So there is a considerable cost in getting these swards, I suppose, germinated and growing. So persistency, we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. In terms of grazing them, I don't think there's any issues with grazing them. I think Aidan Lawless down in Johnstown said like there's no issues. They graze them out very well. So from that respect, they seem to be okay. But again, we want to wait for some hard scientific data to back all these things up. So
Yeah,
uh,
comment that Aidan would have, that they are kind of selective, that they will go for the clovers first, and the ryegrass, and then they will come back then maybe and clean out with the plantain and chickpea. So there is
yeah,
some sort of selectiveness happening there with the cows.
okay, good. So this is a question for you, Micheál. Where do you see pasture base evolving in the next 5 years? So
I suppose if we look back 5 years, I suppose we had a fairly basic system, and up to today now, I suppose we have an offline app. We have fodder budgets, feed budgets, grass budgets, planners. A few new report. There's a couple of new reports gone in there over the last couple of years as well. So we have come on, I suppose, a good bit up to today. And I suppose we have a good bit in the pipeline going on for the next 2 to 3 years. So we're going to link up with NLP Online and Nutrient Management Planning application, which is, I suppose, developed and ran by Teagasc. So that will get your fertilizer plan and your soil fertility. So we'll be hoping to link up with them for that information, so to bring it into Pasture Base, and also that the farmer will be able to map their farm as well. So we'll be able to display results on a map, be it soil fertility, grass covers, days since last grazed. So I suppose that visual should make it a lot easier for men. Especially when guys are maybe have people working on the farm with them, that I suppose try to minimize mistakes, and I suppose try to make it more easier to work on the farm.
And you're working there and there as well, Micheál, like, even on the farm and weather the last couple of weeks, you've had your growth rates up on it.
Yeah, so I suppose every Sunday the actual growth rates and the growth rates are I suppose presented on Micheál at the 1 o'clock weather. And I suppose another thing as well that we will be bringing to Pasture Base will be the grass growth model, which was, I suppose, developed and is currently being validated by LD Rule, working in more parks. So I suppose there are a few things that we have in the pipeline, but I suppose if we come back to more, I suppose, scientific stuff, we'd say that the nutrient efficiency of your farm can be, I suppose, easily enough calculated through Pasture Base with a couple of parameters like the stock sales and maybe imports and exports of slurry. So I suppose Pasture Base, I suppose it is ever changing, and I suppose hopefully that we are going in the right direction. And I suppose you, the farm guys, use it. That if you have any suggestions for us, that you might let us know, and we'll see if have other farmers ask for that, try to make our lives easier.
And it was like your Pasture Base are available on Twitter, so if they want to get in touch with Micheál, they could send something on Twitter or send something. Sure, yeah. How would they contact you, I suppose? Yeah,
or I suppose you can send us an email at support@pbi.ie. We'll reach us all in it.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. So moving on then, another question from Paddy. With the amount of rain in the last month, a good proportion of some farms are saturated on grazable and now have high covers and still growing. What would you advise on those kind of paddocks? Yeah. So we just sort of commented that just at the very beginning of the live event here. So we were a lot of rain on the western seaboard and I suppose the southwest and the northwest along with that. And those farmers probably, grazing conditions got very tricky. So I suppose some of the advice would be to stay away from the wetter paddocks for the moment if you can. Hopefully no one's in a situation where they've all the dry paddocks grazed like we were maybe back last spring. So there has been good drying between showers and things like that, and good temperature. So stay away from them for another couple of days. Like it's looking good for over the weekend and into next week. So probably a good opportunity to get into some of those paddocks now. So keep grazing lighter covers. Even if you're meant to go into some cover of 14 to 1600, maybe skip down to a 12. You get through it a bit quicker. You minimize damage. And I suppose you're looking at going from maybe 36-hour blocks into back to 24 or 12 hours allocations if you are trying to minimize any damage if things are got bad. And I suppose, Paddy, if you have a lot of heavy covers there that you couldn't get to graze, there's probably a good chance that there's probably a good level of grass on the farm then in that scenario if there's a lot of heavy cover. So maybe doing your farm walk, looking at the target, see where you should be, and if you're well ahead, try and take them out maybe for bales when it dries up next week or the next few days. That might be an option to get them to get grass off them now and to get grass back growing for the autumn time.
weather is promised reasonably good for the next few days. So hopefully, day length is still pretty long at the moment. So hopefully that probably these paddocks will dry out, and we will get the opportunity to graze them.
Yeah. So like looking at some of the evapotranspiration from some of the Teagasc catchment program farms, like you could see there that, while there were some farms were getting rainfall that time with the drought, they were also drying out very quickly. So there could have been 4 or 5 mil being evaporated potentially in a day on those scenarios. So if you get 3 or 4 days, it could potentially take 15 to 20 mil of moisture back out of the soil. So it won't take that long to get back to sort of when we can get in and graze them. A day or two might do a lot. So yeah. So then another question there. So any good reseeding methods for establishing multi-species swards without spraying? Well, sure, look, I suppose without spraying, you're probably back to somewhere where you're, obviously when you're not spraying, the grass is still available. So whether you plow over maybe some of the grass and plow down the older sward, maybe after taking a cut of silage or something off it. It might be hard on the ground, or if you have a lot of stony ground, that plowing might be an option. So maybe something like depends what sort of stock you have, but if you could leave dry cows or if depending what stock you have, even if you had sheep, it might be ideal to sort of leave them on it for a prolonged period and just maybe eat it down really, eat the residual out of it, that it would take a long time to come back, and maybe direct drill or stitch in some sort of a sward into it. But
yeah, that's probably the most important thing, I think, because a lot of the multi-species seed is very small. So I suppose it is important that you do contact with the soil. So as John says, try to clean it up, whether it's mechanically using a mower and bale it up, or whether you just cut it and let it rot, or graze it, and maybe use a machine that maybe cuts a slit in the ground and drops in the seed. Rather than spread it broadcast.
Probably something like putting something with low nitrogen in it, like even like a bag of 0730 or maybe a bag of 10-10-20, something with low nitrogen in it that has P and K for the new seeds, but maybe not enough to kickstart the grass growing, that it won't come back real vigorously and smother out any new seeds as well. So
yeah, because the weather at the moment it has been quite broken, and I suppose one advantage of this weather is that it is good weather to take the opportunity to apply lime onto all pastures. So whether it's a reseeded pasture or maybe a field that you cut silage off of, that if you do spread 2 tons of lime per acre, it's washed in, and you can get grazing that paddock in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. That's grand. Yeah. So there's a couple more questions there. What fertilizer do you recommend for the rest of the year? So in terms of nitrogen, we're probably looking maybe at around a unit a day. Now you have to check your NMP plan and see how much you spread to date. And if you can't afford to put any more chemical nitrogen on, maybe even using slurry cleverly or dairy washings or whatever watery slurry, that might be an option. So look, we're sort of saying a unit a day based on the grass growth rates for between now and when it's closed off period on the 14th of September. So that's roughly what it would be, So maybe going with something like around 20 units this week and maybe around 25, 30 units towards the end of the month might do it there. So look, and important this was what fertilizer, we sort of sometimes forget about the other things. So generally with pea, we're talking about building peas in the springtime. So while it might be important to put some pea out now, most of the building will be done for this time of year. It's a really second half sort of super sub. So get your phosphorus out at this time of year, especially on fields and paddocks that have been cut for bales, is very important. So there's about, for every ton of dry matter we take off a field in silage, there's about 25 kilos of K coming off in that. So so that sort of translates to every sort of 5 bales of silage, it's about 1,000 gallons of slurry in terms of K equivalent. So if you took 20 bales off a paddock, you need to put on about 4,000 gallons of slurry back onto that paddock to cancel that K loss in K out. So if you don't have the slurry, a bag of muriated potash is help. You need to really keep your Ks up if you want to grow the tonnage. Without it, you just won't do it. So it's very important for that. So
the question there from Micheál Kavanagh. 2019 we spread 45, I suppose, this kilograms of K per hectare, and 60 kilos of K. Soil samples in 2019, P and K dropped to 2 and 3 index. What would you recommend that we spread this year? P and K.
From samples from 2018, most of the farm was index 3, 4. So each sample spread 45p and 60k. So that was last year. And soil samples then at the end of last year showed K had dropped to 2, 3. What would you recommend we spread this year? Look, I suppose on the K front, if there was bales coming off, 60k may or may not have been enough on it. If there was heavy cuts of silage coming off it, 45p seems high enough. Maybe I suppose maybe when was it applied? Was it applied all at once or in 2 goes or over 3 or 4 different applications? Maybe little and often could be a best scenario with that.
And maybe just sure as well that when you are taking a soil sample, I suppose it is a common mistake, I suppose, is that the length of the core, the length of the sample that you are taking needs to be 3 to 4 inches. So you need to get a sample of 3 to 4 inches in depth. So sometimes the sampling can be a small bit maybe skewed that way. Maybe the ground conditions weren't dry enough in order to take the sample. But you can see that you are after dropping, which isn't ideal, I suppose. So something, and I suppose tying into the last question, so if you are in low K, something like muriated potash would be, I suppose, the bag fertilizer that you would be going with. And there is no, I suppose,
about 50 units in a bag, so that could sometimes be enough to bring it up 1 index. So what would you go with me? Would a bag, if you're index 1, like would you put 1 bag on? Or
I'd go for a bag, yeah. I'd go with a bag and try to see how that goes.
Yeah.
And I suppose you can spread it as much as you want, but I suppose splitting off is often better than a bang. But coming back to Micheál's question there, I suppose we really need to see what your nutrient management plan looks like, or what you're allowed to spread. But the fertilizer, something like 18-12, is well balanced to bring up P's and K's, I suppose. So I suppose ideally you should be doing a nutrient management plan, a fertilizer plan, and I suppose targeting slurry at different times of the year to the to the lowest paddocks, in order to bring up the average of the farm.
Yeah, so that's 100%, Micheál. I think there's no more questions there anyway, so I think it's probably time to finish up. There's a few people dropping off. So just to summarise, I suppose, over the next 6 weeks really is key time for building up, and the higher stocked you are, the earlier you start. So if you're stocked at 3.5 livestock units, you probably start after the weekend. If you're stocked around 3, it's probably next weekend, and then maybe the following weekend if you're lower stocked at 2.5. So what I mean is you start is you don't take any more surplus bales off it. You're moving from your 160 to 180 per cow, which is your 12 to 14 days ahead for dry stock farmers, and grazing covers of 14. You're starting to build up that. So the higher stocked you are, the earlier start. If we leave it too late, if we leave ourselves till the end of August and we're higher stocked, it's going to be too hard. We're going to have to put in maybe lots of meal or silage, and really you're sort of replacing meal and silage that you're feeding out in September to try and build that grass. When it's too late, you're just feeding in September rather than November. So really the game is won and lost in August. If you don't start in August, probably a poorer return to go and start in September. Especially when you're into grazing heavier covers, you don't want to be having to feed silage and things to try and build covers as well, when you're grazing heavy covers. And once you start feeding silage too, it's important. If you're allocating silage, you allocate grass. So once silage goes in, you're back to 12-hour strips, and that's what people sometimes don't do. And when they start feeding silage, then they can't graze out paddocks properly. So it's important there to build. So find a target that suits your farm. Maybe talk to your local Teagasc advisor about where what might suit your farm best, or talk to the fellas in your discussion groups or lads who have been using the targets before, and see where they go to, and see where you should go to. So if your farm cover is 700 this week, and you need to get to 1100 in 40 days, you're building by 440 days. So you need your growth to be 10 above your demand. So if it's growing, go to growth. Sorry, I don't know if you heard me there, Micheál.
No, you can just repeat the last line there, John.
Yeah, no. So if you don't start in time, the difference between the growth and demand that we need is going to be, it's not going to be high enough, or we end up feeding more supplement into the diet to build the grass. So you can build it for simply even by stretching rotation, then from 20 days out to 25 days in the middle of the month, 30 days at the end of the month, 35 days to 40 days. So every sort of 2 weeks you're adding on 5 days onto your rotation, and you can do it that way either. For people who maybe are only getting the hang of it, to stretch your rotation out and your days ahead, you're increasing your days ahead. So that'd be I suppose the goal for the next 6 weeks anyway. And bring as much ground as you can back in for grazing. Remove any other stock out to outblocks if you can. It might even be worth selling some culls or some fat stock to reduce your demand to meet the peak. And be sure the fertilizer is out, I suppose, as well. So
we'd be encouraging every farmer then, I suppose, to do a grass budget on pasture base.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's like any budget. I suppose you kind of have to keep looking at it and to see, I suppose, where are you and where are you versus the target. I suppose taking action.
Yeah.
In order trying to stay on target.
Yeah. So that's 100%, Micheál. I suppose I'd just like to thanks everyone for tuning in today. To Stephen, I'd like to give a plug to Grassland Farm of the Year competition open tomorrow. So you can follow us on our social media to hear more about that. So Micheál, you're also involved in a live Zoom webinar next Wednesday night.
So next night with Donald Patton and a farmer,
guest dairy
farmer.
farmer. So, and what will you be covering there? Who's that for? If people wanted to join it.
So I suppose like this evening we're going through the autumn targets, and I suppose on that Zoom call we will be using pasture base, and I suppose in creating a plan for the farmer, and I suppose getting his thoughts on, I suppose, how does he achieve a high cover, and how does he graze into it, and
yeah, and Donald has great practical experience from Ballyhaze and from a lot of farms up there in dealing with tricky ground conditions. He's based around Cavan, so they don't have the driest of land at times. So he's very used to dealing with that sort of thing. So it's well worth tuning in. We follow social media. Basically, we'll have a link so you can register for the Zoom meeting next week for that. So we hope we answered all your questions okay, up to your standards. So if not, get in touch with us through our social media channels. So Micheál is at Pasture Base at Twitter, and we're at Teagasc Grass 10 on Twitter, and we also have our Grass 10 Pasture Base Facebook group. So if you type in Grass 10 Pasture Base into the search bar on Facebook, you should find the group there. We started earlier on this year. We've over about 1,700 members there at the moment. So there's a lot of experience there with from farmers who are measuring grass and have been managing grass well for years. So a lot of experience on that group. So join it, and if you're on, I suppose, a journey to try and improve grassland management on your farm, ask questions. There's a lot of people who've been down the road before you, and learn from their mistakes and things like that. So join us, I suppose, and keep in touch with us that way. So with that, I suppose I wish everyone a success in their autumn grazing management, and hope it improves their profitability on your farms. So thanks very much, and thanks to Micheál. And with that, I suppose we'll finish up. Thank you. Thanks, Micheál.
Thanks everyone for the questions.
Yeah.
Thanks,
lads. All right. Goodbye.